Hello everyone and welcome to this video in which we'll be discussing the solutions of a reading comprehension exercise from CAT 2024 slot 1. This particular passage is about streaming services. It's specifically about online streaming services like Netflix and HBO Max. And this passage is actually pretty simple read. So when you start reading the passage, what are the things that you need to focus upon? First thing, as I've shown on the screen itself, that you need to focus upon when you're reading the passage is here, right? In this part of the passage, we have got things which have been written where the opinion of the author begins. That something seems like a vindication for those who had long warned that streaming was more about controlling access to cultural commons than expanding it. So a lot of people said that, streaming is not very democratic. It is a way for companies to control content and not to give people democratic access to the content that they're streaming. And what led to that some indication that the fact that some of the streaming things that we are buying subscriptions for, they just get removed. So we have no control over what content I'm buying. I'm just subscribing to a particular entity, and then the company decides that what I can watch and what I cannot watch. And suddenly they will give me something, suddenly they will take away something. So which means that I don't have control. The people do not have democratic control over what we are watching and what we are not. And the next paragraph tells us the next major point that the author is trying to make, which is that what's less clear is whether the commonly prescribed cure for these cultural ills, a return to the material pleasures of physical media, is the right one or not. So this particular first sentence of the second paragraph actually tells us more or less the entirety of the point that the author is trying to make throughout the passage. The author is trying to tell us that not only do we have no democratic control, but also we don't have any other alternative, because he's questioning whether there is any kind of an alternative. And the rest of the passage talks about the fact that we cannot go back to our older alternatives like Blu-ray discs or DVDs. And even when we are buying content, like when we are not subscribing to things like HBO Max and Netflix, even if you're buying content from streaming services like Apple, how that also is not a complete ownership of the product that we are buying. So this is what is the point that the author is trying to make. And if these two sentences we can read and we can focus upon it, if this we can imbibe, everything else is just the author trying to elaborate on this point. In fact, he goes on to say that how Blu-ray players, discs, we don't know how long it will last. Last DVD players also, or DVD discs, have been shown to deteriorate over time very quickly. Plus, we don't know whether we'll have technology to continue to process these kind of content. Plus, the author is saying that when we are buying content from Apple, when we move from one geography to other, we lose access to a lot of the things that we have bought. And even if we don't lose access, even if we use VPN and all, still we cannot transfer that thing that we have bought from one software to the other. And then in the second to last paragraph, the author is kind of tying together this entire opinion that the fact that we do not democratically own movies, but it is completely a corporate venture, can be traced back to years like 1926. That even when Charlie Chaplin wanted to write off his taxes, he did not care about whether people have access to his movies or not. He burned down his reels. So this is the point that the author is trying to make. Last paragraph is saying that at least back then it was not thought that we can watch movies forever. Right now, of course, companies are milking that content that we can watch movies forever and forever. But back then it was not like that. And back then people burning it did not affect us much. But increasingly, because now content can be available, and companies pride themselves on being churning out really good content over and over and over again. So it is kind of a betrayal of what we believe to be ownership, and nothing is in our hands. And it's corporate ownership that determines what movies and what content we can watch and what we cannot. This is what the passage is about. But two sentences in the passage, one sentence in the very beginning part of the first paragraph, one sentence in the beginning part of the second paragraph, is what the entire passage is about. Everything else is an elaboration of that idea, and then a few points about it here and there are given. And for that reason, I feel that this is not a very difficult passage to read. Let's understand a few more things about this passage. So this passage is about 509 words long, absolutely bang on average word count, not a long passage to read at all. The passage is analytical. The author is analyzing how ownership of content works and whether it's a scam, whether it's not. It's kind of a critical analysis that we believe that we are owning the content that we're subscribing to, but when we in reality are not. This passage has been taken from The Guardian. So it is from an international magazine. Again, it's an analytical article on content. I would say ideal time to read will be anywhere between 2 to 2.5 minutes. And maximum time that someone can take to read this is about 3 minutes, 10 seconds. I'm giving the 2 to 2.5 minutes basically because this is maybe an idea, and the way that it has been presented is very Western in its context, although we have got some kind of relationship to it. But the names of the shows, the names of the movies that have been mentioned, even streaming services, you have mentioned HBO Max, which we don't have. Every one of our services is in Hotstar. So maybe that familiarity of content can make it difficult, or not difficult, I would say a bit choppy for us to read. That's why I'm giving 2.5 minutes, maximum 3 minutes. If you're reading this for longer than 3 minutes, you are trying to understand things that you absolutely need not understand. And overall difficulty, I would say easy to moderate, and moderate only because, as I said before, the contents that have been mentioned is not familiar to us. A few things that people should become familiar with if they are not from this passage after reading the passages. Number one, the word Sisyphean. The Sisyphean refers to what happened to King Sisyphus. It's a Greek mythology. There's a King Sisyphus whose Zeus wanted to punish for several reasons. I will not get into the story of it, but I'll tell you the gist of what the punishment was. The punishment that Zeus gave him was that for eternity, Sisyphus has to push a rock up a mountain. So he will never die, and for eternity he'll be alive. He's immortal, and he will keep on having to push a rock till the top of a mountain. And as soon as the rock reaches the top of the mountain, it will roll down. And again, he will have to come back, and he will again have to push the rock up the mountain once again. And this is what he has to keep on doing over and over and over and over again. So Sisyphean is a word used to describe tasks that often feel meaningless, very, very burdensome, but very meaningless, and it's like very commonplace. We cannot find any meaning or satisfaction to it. So it is like when people describe that I am doing work, but I don't understand why am I doing it. Like when people go to corporate offices and they are working, and they have been given a task which they have to do every single day in, day out, and they have no connection with the final product that has been made, then the task begins to seem very Sisyphean. Go and read Sisyphus' mythology, because oftentimes that story is also the cornerstone, the foundation of several philosophies, very famous philosophies. Notable among them is a philosophy by Albert Camus. And his name has appeared multiple times in philosophy-based passages in the CAT paper. So Albert Camus is an absurdist philosophy, very, very modern philosopher. So he uses Sisyphus' story to actually prove that that is the meaning of life. That life is so absurd that having something to do, even if it has got no meaning, having something to do, even without meaning, is what makes life meaningful. He says Sisyphus is happy having a task. Problem is when we don't have a task to do, that is when life starts feeling very depressing and sad. So it's a very weird philosophy, but you can, of course, familiarize yourself with it. And then the word ephemeral. Ephemeral is a word, if you don't know the meaning of, please Google and find out. Ephemeral means something which is fleeting, like something which is there now and then not there in the next moment. So something which is very, very temporary, that in a blink of an eye disappears, that is ephemeral. So find out the meaning of those words, and these are pretty popular words. If they appear in subsequent reading comprehension passages, you should know their meanings, and if you know their meanings, understanding the passage will become better. So this is what I wanted to discuss in this particular video, where we are only reading the passage. Next video, we'll discuss the questions and solutions of this passage. Thank you.